Welcome to Midlife Schmidlife, the online community for listeners who want to redefine the middle years and recreate their lives lived to the fullest. Join our host, Liz Applegate, as she interviews guests over the age of 40 who are turning their maybe somedays into today and going after their dreams. Let's get the party started.
Hey, Schmidlifers. Welcome to Season 2 of the Midlife Schmidlife podcast. I'm Liz Applegate, your host, midlife mentor, and transformative life coach, and I'm so happy to be back on air bringing you the Midlife Schmidlife podcast. I did want to let you know that the podcast will be moving to an every other week format. I really have had this pull to begin writing more, and this will allow me to reach an audience that may not be familiar with podcasting. And I know that seems like hard to believe, but actually there are people who don't know about the goodness of podcasting. And if you know someone like that, please take them to the Midlife Schmidlife website and invite them to listen right there on the website. Show them how easy it is just to click play. Also, show them how they can set up podcasting in iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and iHeartRadio. While you're there, be sure to leave a review and rating. It means so much when you share the Midlife Schmidlife message with others, and it really helps me to know that you are enjoying the show. I'm excited to kick off Season 2 and 2017 with today's guest, Mark Jaffe. Mark is a former Walt Disney Records exec, a dad, marathon runner, adventurer, seeker of daily joy, and the author of The Suitcase of Happyness. This is just such a great topic of conversation. I'm coming to you at the beginning of 2017, and I don't know about you, but I could definitely use some more happiness in my day. So we actually dive in and talk about choosing joy and happiness every single day. Mark gives some great pointers, we have some great conversations, and he shares some real life stories with us. I know you're going to love this episode. And if you'd like to find the links to connect with Mark, head over to the show notes at midlifeschmidlife.com/episode 21. So now let's just head on over to the interview. Hi, Mark. Welcome to Midlife Schmidlife.
Thank you, Liz. I'm so glad to be here.
I am so glad as well. First of all, I have to say this, and I didn't mention this before we started recording, but I wanted to let you know that you are the first brave man to be on the Midlife Schmidlife podcast. So, welcome.
Really?
Yes.
Well,
yes.
You know, men have midlife, schmidlife too, and you'd be shocked how many of them actually won't let you know that.
Yes. Yes. So I was going to roll into the whole crisis thing. So that's kind of the thing where I'm trying to bring the whole crisis under control and have some fun with it. So I really appreciate you being here.
Sure. You know, I belong to this group of professional advisors. I mean, I have a day job where, I advise companies on how to grow their business. And sometimes you'll go into these rooms, particularly when I would talk about the book. And some of these guys, they're really masters of the universe. I mean, they're at the top of their game. They're making who knows how much money, but they really look like they have it under control. And after I talk about Suitcase of Happyness and how to achieve and enjoy your happiest life, invariably, one of them pulls me aside and kind of in a hushed tone says, "Can you and I talk further and just keep it between us?" And that's when I realized men really do go through this crisis, but it's not macho, it's not manly, and they don't want to acknowledge it to others.
Right. I've been wanting to have a conversation around that. Not that I felt like you and I would have that, but just because I don't know. I mean, it's usually we use that midlife crisis term and we think of a man going out and buying a red convertible, right? I mean, that's kind of the picture. Maybe it's just for women that we get that picture, but but honestly, women experience that as well. And I just have this feeling that the deep root of all of that is the same. The external things that we do, may look different, but deep down, it's just really a realization of what your life is now, mixed with regrets of what your life was and uncertainty about what your life will become.
And also expectations. I mean, in these conversations, what I find is these guys and women, of course, too, will say, but I did everything right. I found the man of my dreams or the woman of my dreams. I had the 2 kids, the 1.4 pets, and the 2.3 cars, and the house in the suburbs, and the concert tickets, and all that stuff, the great vacations, and, you know, the beautiful dress or suit. And I still go to sleep at night, and I wonder why I'm not happy.
Exactly.
Or at least as happy as I thought I would be. And now I'm in my 40s, my 50s, my 60s. Last night I spoke to a group of people that were all over 70. And the same thing happens. Once you get through that piece of life where you're focused on your kids or you're focused on your career, and you have a moment, a quiet moment, tends to be right about the time you go to sleep or around 3 a.m. when you wake up. And those thoughts start to plague you.
Right.
And, you know, which is why I'm so excited to talk to your audience, because I think they get it. You know, when I talk to 35-year-olds, sometimes they get it, sometimes they don't. But something happens at that time when you hit, quote, midlife, when you get it.
Right, right. Really was a turning point to me with the realization that when my oldest was graduating high school and going off to college, it hit me like a ton of bricks, actually, that my life was changing quickly and I didn't know who I was. And so I had these amazing children, and, you know, yes, I had a lot of heartache along the way and life experiences, but it still was sort of this, okay, now what do I need in my life, and how can I live, you know, how can I live it to my best potential with happiness? And so I'm just really excited that we're going to have this conversation.
Oh, well, thanks. You know, there's a quote that I'm trying to remember. I think it was by a 19th century congressman named William Randolph. And he wrote, "Time is the most valuable of all of our possessions." And I think we become conscious of that as we get older. And I think we say, in terms of the regrets you mentioned earlier, I think we say, okay, maybe I haven't used the first 40 or 50 years the way I wanted to, but I still have time left. Exactly. How am I going to use that?
Exactly. Yes, yes. And that's what I'm hoping that actually this podcast can be, is to help people realize that they do have a lot of time left and they don't have to just succumb to what society and media throws our way, that we can actually have very fulfilling lives. So it's exciting.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, happiness is like most things in life that we want. It rarely comes to those who are passively waiting. And I think it is an active choice. It's one of the premises that I believe with all my heart, that happiness is an active choice. And whether you wake up tomorrow morning at age 51 or age 81, you have a choice that day. Are you going to focus on the bills you have to pay, on the gardener who never seems to cut the grass correctly? Or are you going to focus on a connection with someone you care about? Or are you going to focus on, at least in Los Angeles, the air is so crisp and beautiful after all these rains, like we've never seen it before.
Right.
So what you focus on, you find. And so the key is make the right choice. Make a choice to be happy, and you're never too old to make that choice.
I love that. I love that. And so I was going to ask you this at the beginning of our interview, so I'm going to ask it right now before I forget. How old are you, and what do you love about being this age?
I am 58, and I'm a marathon runner. I have my own business. And what I love about being 58, and I'm sure most people will laugh at this, is that I feel like I'm 28, but with the wisdom I didn't have at that age, because I'm so active. I mean, just a few months ago, I went on a 32-mile hike in the Sequoias. You know, eating right and exercising is really important to me. And being able to go on these amazing adventures that I do is important to me. And as long as I'm able to do it, I'm going to do it. But now I have the wisdom. of knowing what's important, when at age 28, I really didn't.
Right. Yes. Yes. So thankful for that wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So you have mentioned Suitcase of Happiness, which is a wonderful book, and I highly recommend it. Why don't you kind of explain a little bit, how this book came to be, what your inspiration was, and we can just dive in from there.
Oh, thank you. I've been a relatively happy person virtually my entire life. And at one point, maybe it was about, being in my late 50s, I realized I wanted to give the legacy of that happiness to my children. And I have this amazing relationship with both Jason and Marissa, who are 23 and 26. And, we see each other all the time. We talk to each other many times a week. But there's something about calling your kids and saying, let's go to lunch so I can tell you how to be happy, that just doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like an invitation that they would accept. And so I decided to write a book. I decided to put all my thoughts down in this book about creating a roadmap to achieve and to enjoy your happiest life. And about 6 months after starting, and right after I finished the manuscript, I heard a story. And it was a story about this couple in Paris, France, Veronique and Jaffe de Bougie. They had 2 kids. They had the idyllic family that we all want, and some of us were fortunate enough to have, other of us didn't. And it's that loving, tight-knit family where they have dinner together every night, and they go on adventures together and vacations together, and they share their lives, and they laugh, and they talk, and they connect. And one particular night, Veronique said, hey, tonight I'm going to go out with some friends to the cafe. I'll see you when I get back. And so they lived in Paris. She went to one of those beautiful cafes. And unfortunately, that night was in November of 2015. And it was the night of a terrorist attacks in Paris, France, and she was killed. And 3 days later, at the funeral where Jaffe was, who was a very famous photographer, was giving the eulogy, he spoke about what kept them going during those horrible moments. And, when you reach this age, with all lost people, we laughed, and we know what those moments are like right after you hear about someone's passing. And he said what kept him and his 2 children going, what got them from one miserable, horrific moment to the next, and finally to that day 3 days later, was Veronique's valise de bonheur, her suitcase of happiness. And it wasn't a real suitcase. It was a metaphorical suitcase. But for years, as long as any of them could remember, every incredible happy moment she had, as simple as smelling a fresh baked muffin from the bakery, to a wonderful vacation, to a great laugh, to a joke, to a story, to kissing her kids goodnight, whatever those incredible, wonderful, happy moments were, she put them in that suitcase and surrounded herself with this just sea of happiness, that she lived her life in the sea of happiness. And she would take those moments out and recreate them and create new ones. And it was the whole practice of having this moment of happiness and all the happiness that resulted that she shared with her family that kept her family going. But there was another reason as well. And the other reason was that her valise de bonheur, her suitcase of happiness, became the prescription by which her children could also reach happiness, by which her husband could also reach happiness. And it was her legacy to them. And when I heard this story, it just stopped me in my tracks, because I realized, like Veronique, I wrote the book for the same reason she lived her life in that way.
Right.
And here I am with a person I never met, thousands and thousands of miles away, doesn't even speak my language. I mean, Jaffe's eulogy, believe it or not, is still on YouTube in French. You could listen to it. And we both wanted to leave the same legacy to our children.
Right.
And so I named the book Suitcase of Happiness, which is the English translation of Valise de Bonheur.
Wow. What an incredible story. It's, yes, very, very moving. Very. Goodness.
Well, I'm sure a lot of us talk about legacy. And actually, legacy, I mean, in the book, I have these 10 pathways to happiness. And the priority of meaning is sometimes for many people, it certainly is for me, contained in legacy. And when I think about it, what's important is not that our name is remembered, but that what we've left after we're gone is meaningful, enduring, and the impact it's had on others. That's our legacy. And, Veronique de Bougie, me, you, all of us want to leave a meaningful legacy. And this is just one of the ways I've left mine.
Yeah. And what a great legacy, really. I mean, when I think about how many people are reading your book, this is, gone way beyond just a book for your children, but you are affecting other people who are affecting other people, and it's just like ripples in a quiet stream of water. Just the you don't know how far the ripples are going out, and that's just beautiful.
Well, last night, as I mentioned, I gave a presentation to B'nai B'rith, this organization of people that were all over 70. And I talked about one of the other precepts of the book is that happiness can coexist peacefully with unhappiness. I mean, we've all had horrific events in our lives and people we've lost or obstacles that we haven't been able to overcome. And yet, simultaneous with all those things existing in our life, we're happy. And I talked extensively about that. Mm-hmm. And this woman came up to me afterwards. She must have been in her mid to late 70s. And she said, Mark, I have to tell you, I lost my son when he was 17, many, many, many years ago. And it's that concept of acceptance, of truly accepting those things that are unchangeable and allowing them to peacefully be part of me, that has given me the happiness that I've had for the last 20, 30 years of my life. Mm-hmm. And she said, I thought you would understand in a way no one else would.
Wow. You must be a mind reader, because I actually have that section highlighted in my book.
Really?
Yes, I do. Barrier 1, the resistance to acceptance. I have it right here in front of me.
Wow. Well, I actually had a very profound experience. I mean, a lot of what you read in this book is really just me learning, me growing and learning through my own experience. And in that chapter, I talk about this woman after I had gotten divorced, who I felt very, very deeply in love with, who suddenly and unexpectedly committed suicide. Mm-hmm. And, as you know from, I'm sure, many of the people you've worked with whose loved ones have committed suicide, it's incredibly profound and traumatic.
Yes.
And I remember just struggling and surrounded by this sea of darkness that just wouldn't lift. It just would envelop me and keep me in. And I'm like, but wait a minute, I want to be happy. And I'm fighting this darkness. And I talked to one guy who is very in tune and very sensitive, and he's a life coach as well as a business coach to CEOs. And he said, I have a thought for you, Mark, to consider. Why don't you just say to yourself, when you're feeling particularly miserable, say, I feel really miserable right now, and here's the reason why. And I said, okay, I could do that. And then what do I do? He goes, that's it. That's all you have to do. I'm saying, but then what? I mean, I'm miserable. I know I'm miserable. He goes, trust me, over time, it will make a difference for you. And it did. And what I didn't realize that he taught me was by acknowledging that out loud, it's part of me accepting that this is something I can no longer change. Let me focus my life on the elements that I can change.
Right.
And let this just exist as part of me. And what's interesting is that now, I mean, it's been 5 years. And when I think of her, I can smile at the joy we experienced and also still understand the pain of her loss. Mm-hmm. And that's all part of who I am.
Right.
And so it actually gives you permission to enjoy the joy. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's in essence what acceptance does. It gives you permission to enjoy your happiness, to enjoy your joy. And so I'm interested as to why you highlighted it for yourself.
Well, I think that, what I was touched by, I want to add in here too, is that in this book, it's not a book of fluff. It's not a book of just like, oh, say this mantra 10 times and you'll be happy. You share your real life experiences, the incredible highs and the wonderful stories and observations and the people you encounter, but you also share these personal, very moving and sad and, just you share your life and how that has affected you. And so I wanted to make sure that our listeners know that this isn't just a typical book sometimes you read on happiness that just doesn't have a lot of meat behind it, because you do show that you can have real life happen, which real life is messy and painful, but you can still choose to have that happiness. And I think I highlighted it mainly just because when I know that I am working with clients, and I certainly have experienced it as well, and I can think of a recent incident where I basically was not accepting and I was trying to push down those feelings. It was like I didn't want to feel them. I just was trying to push them away. And I feel like our society is really, we're just kind of in tune to doing that. We'll drink the extra glass of wine or turn on Netflix or, we numb out and we don't allow ourselves to feel those feelings. But what happens when we do that, when we don't accept, is we are also not allowing ourselves to feel other feelings as well. We're really totally numbing ourselves out. And so I think that was why I highlighted it, because it just sort of gave a story that certainly, though I had not lost someone in that way, I have lost relationships where I was trying to just kind of push down those feelings, and how that affected me as well.
Well, when you push down the feelings, they're going to bubble right up. You can't push down a helium balloon unless you pop it, right?
Right.
It's going to bubble right up. And it's a struggle, because what you don't realize is you are struggling to keep compartmentalized feelings away from you. And Eckhart Tolle, you're probably familiar with this, once said, once we stop struggling against what is real and unchangeable, other feelings are able to become our reality. And what we don't realize is that struggle not only doesn't successfully push away the bad feelings, but it does very much push away the good feelings, because there's no room for those feelings within the struggle.
Right. So true. So true. I'm like, I'm sitting here going, yes, yes. Right. And honestly, it's interesting because, well, we are recording this. It's January of 2017. And I actually just had this realization that probably why I highlighted this is because of my feelings, and I don't really want to get into a political discussion, but just my feelings around what's happening and the sadness that I'm feeling. And I don't know that I live in a very conservative area, so I'm not really able to share that or express that. And feel safe about doing so. And so it probably really, hit me when I read that wow, this is probably something I need to look at. So you just life coached me. Thank you so much, Mark.
Oh, I'm so glad I did. And it's interesting because I live in Los Angeles, okay, where there are a lot of people who feel the way you do. And there's a lot of discussion about it. And people are still walking around like zombies. Yes. And they're not taking account to the fact that this is life on today's date in January of 2017. This is the way the world is. This is the way the United States is. And we have to accept that and then say, how do we move forward for ourselves? Because, when you're consumed with either anger or any of these other negative emotions, it's having the next steps to move forward for yourself that frees you of much of it. And I think, and when I tell people this, they're like, you know what? I should stop. I should stop struggling against what has already happened. And you should figure out, what does this mean for your life? How do you move forward? And how can you now create the life you want within a different context than perhaps you had hoped would happen on January 20th?
Right. Yes, definitely something for a lot of us to explore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm curious why you chose to. So, Suitcase of Happiness. Happiness is with a Y, and so it's
Mm-hmm.
Appyyness. Why did you choose that spelling?
Well, it's funny. When I first was talking to people about happiness, and I got trying to get so many different impressions of what it is, and no one actually had the same point of view. But the funniest one was, I guess this is still PG. I was
Oh
talking
no,
to somebody about how do you
yeah, you can go all out. It's fine.
Okay, I was talking to somebody about how they define happiness, and they basically said happiness is like an orgasm. It's
Mhm.
usually incredible, but much too brief. And I thought, that really, I don't believe in that type of happiness. I don't believe in these brief, euphoric, incredible moments that then go away to the drudgery of life. And now we live in drudgery until the next brief, euphoric moment happens, who knows, maybe a week hence or
Right.
a year hence, right? So I felt it was important to differentiate between the happiness that we all think we know what it is to an enduring, lasting state of happiness, a go-to state that people can enjoy 24/7. And so the question becomes, how do you get there? And I basically put together 4 steps, very concrete steps on how to get there. And the first one is what you focus on, you find. And my favorite example of that is my best friend since I was 15. We every year would pick a spot on the map, literally because we thought it looked interesting, like a very jagged coastline or a place that had some mountains. And we would fly there, rent a 4-wheel drive, and explore. And that was how we had fun. And so we picked the Oregon coast once. And if you've ever been up there, it rained pretty much, 360 out of 365 days. But the one day we were there, it was bright and sunny, and the clouds had parted, and there was just an amazing array of beautiful women, quite frankly, walking up and down this small town street. And my eyes are just agape. And after these 2 particularly beautiful, beautiful women passed me, I looked at my friend Bob and I said, "Did you see that?" He goes, "Oh, yes, it's amazing how they weather the salt air." I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Oh, yeah, there shows no sign of decay whatsoever." And then he said, "I'm going in for a closer look." And I'm thinking, okay, here comes impending disaster. This is not going to go well. And as I'm about to reach him and pretty much yank him back to his senses, I notice he's not walking towards the girls. He's actually walking towards these houses that are lining the ocean on the beach. And he wasn't looking at the girls. He was actually looking at the shingles on the houses because he was building a house on the beach himself in Southern California, and he wanted shingles that weathered the salt air. And it just struck me, how could my best friend not see incredibly beautiful women? It's impossible. It's because he wasn't focused on girls. I was focused on girls. He was focused on building his house. And so he's thinking, this is one of the wettest places on the planet. I'm going to look at the shingles on the houses here to see what I should buy for my house. And so it just illustrated what you focus on, you find. And if you focus on happiness, you will find it. I mean, there are happy moments all over. And the only thing stopping us from having them is to find them and to say yes to them. And so clearly the first thing to do is to focus on happiness and find happiness. And what you'll find is the next thing is that what you focus on grows. So the first day, the first week, the first month, maybe you'll focus on finding happiness. You'll find a couple things. But after a while, like practice makes perfect, all of a sudden you'll see happy moments everywhere. And it becomes a matter of which ones am I going to take? I mean, they're just all sitting there. It's like, the first harvest of fruit and all that low-hanging fruit. You don't know which ones to go for. And then when you focus on becomes real, that becomes the real point of view you have as you go about your day. It is just finding all these happy things, and it becomes very natural. I mean, I'm sure when I was 4 years old and my mom said, Mark, brush your teeth, I'm like, how am I going to remember this every day?
Right.
Well, whoever thinks in their 50s about remembering to brush your teeth, it's just part of your life. And the same is true for finding happiness. And then ultimately, the last step is you become what you focus on. And that's an amazing thing. Now it's no effort to focus on happiness because that's who I am.
Right.
And the best example I have of that is when I was a kid and I decided that I was a very unhappy kid. I mean, I was shy. I had one friend. He wasn't very popular either. And my parents decided to move to California from New York. And I decided I was going to be happy. I was going to be popular. I was going to have lots of friends. And so I literally went on this quest to figure out what it took to be popular and how to make friends and how to keep friends. And I spent months and months looking at the most popular kids in junior high school, which for a shy kid is pretty easy because no one even notices you exist. You're just kind of in the corner.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. And then when we went cross country, we would stay in these campgrounds every night, a different KOA campground. And what do all the 15-year-old kids do? They go to the rec room, they play ping pong, and they make friends. The perfect laboratory to see if I could get kids to like me.
Right.
And guess what? If they didn't, which often they didn't, it doesn't matter. I'm going to a new campground 500 miles away the next day. So I'll never see these kids again. So I ultimately get to high school in California. I make a ton of friends and, you know, I've this really great life that I'm truly enjoying. A year later, I'm in this class, which, you know, from Texas, you'll probably think that we're a bunch of nuts in California. That wouldn't be the first time. But it's a class that only could be offered in Southern California in the 1970s, which was called Awareness in Living. That's your tax dollars at work. It's teaching us awareness in living.
But that's an awesome class.
Oh, I'm telling you, it was my favorite class in high school. I'm not sure my parents thought so highly of it, but I thought it was great. And one of the exercises was for you to get a randomly assigned person in the room, and then on a piece of paper, a blank sheet of paper that you didn't have to sign, you were to say what you thought of that individual. And so, of course, we're all 16 years old. We're petrified as to what people think of us. And I get my sheet, and I still don't know who wrote it. But what it said was, you see the world through rose-colored glasses. Do we still live in the same effing world?
Wow.
And I realized I had become what I focused on. I had become a happy person. I projected happiness to everybody around me so that some random individual, when asked to assess my being, came up with that.
Right.
You do become what you focus on. So what you focus on, you find. What you focus on grows. What you focus on becomes very, very real. And you ultimately become what you focus on. And that's how you could live a lifetime of happiness with a Y, an enduring, lasting state of being happy.
Such great tips, Mark. Awesome. Just awesome.
Thanks.
And it goes back to when we first started our conversation, you were saying how happiness is a choice and every day. And so every day you have the opportunity to really choose your focus. Yeah.
You really can, you know, and there are barriers. I mean, sometimes we actually choose barriers and we don't do anything about them. Like when, you know, my son graduated college recently and he was starting the workforce. And I remember thinking, how am I going to guide him in life to being successful? As a matter of fact, how do you ever know if you are successful? What is success? Right? And I realized, you know, I came to a conclusion for myself that I shared with him. And I realized success is the ability and the freedom to do whatever you want to do, whenever you want to do it, with people who are meaningful to you. It's not really a sum total of your bank account, because in my opinion, you could be making much less money and be far more successful in life by that definition than people who make a lot of money and are miserable.
Right.
Because after all, the ladder of success leads rung by rung to really more success, not more happiness.
Right.
And I just felt that, and the endless pursuit of success is one of the barriers I discuss in great detail in the book, because in particular, when we're consumed in our 20s and 30s and 40s about having a career, and of course that no longer just applies to men. Women are so dominant in the workforce now, I think it applies as much to women. We lose sight of what the true definition of success is.
Right.
And it is the ability, in my opinion, it's the ability and the freedom to do whatever we want to do whenever we want to do it with people who are meaningful to us. And that's how I define a successful life.
Yeah, and that, speaking of career, that's why a lot of times we get to midlife and we realize, oh, wait, I've got the college degree, I got the career, I did all these things, but now I'm not happy, and then this is why there's a lot of shift for career changes or starting businesses, because people are taking those steps when they realize, hey, wait, this isn't me anymore. So, and going, trying to find the true success of what fills them. And maybe they don't identify it as happiness, but really that's what everyone is seeking when you think about it.
Well, when I was giving that talk last night, these people that I'm speaking with are definitely beyond midlife crisis. They're kind of, in old age crisis. Like, what do we do with the 5, 10, 20 years we have left? And they are so conscious of that, because now they're all retired and they could really devote themselves to really maximizing every moment. And you can see in the room the people that chose to be happy and the people that aren't making that choice. And I had a number of people come up to me because now they could really focus on that. Now that becomes a real topic that dominates their life, as opposed to being an accessory that they realize should have been a bigger part of their life. Right. And I had a number of people come up to me and say, Mark, there are people in this room that I just choose not to associate with because they don't want to be happy, and I do.
Yeah.
And I think, it comes to a point where you find those people that reinforce the joy and the happiness, and that will help you seek out the moments and will join you in saying yes to incredible experiences, as opposed to those who will say no and stop you from achieving, the happiness that you want.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is so important. And that is something I think that is kind of one of those, with age comes wisdom. The wisdom we were sharing in the beginning was realizing that you don't have to be okay with having people that are dragging you down, or what I call energy suckers, just like you don't have to have them in your circle. Doesn't mean you have to be rude. It just means they don't have to be in your circle.
I oftentimes spend a lot of time when I give presentations talking about the first pathway to happiness, called the rule of yes. And, it's all about saying yes to experiences that could produce happiness. Because, moments of happiness don't have to happen. They're waiting to happen. And if you say yes, that's often all the encouragement they need. And what most people don't realize is that these moments of happiness that are all around us, if we don't say yes to them, they just kind of float away, and we're never even conscious we could have had them.
Yeah.
I mean, my children and I went to Iceland over the summer, and my deal with my kids is I'm happy to pay for whatever trip anywhere in the world you want to go. You guys plan it out, which is kind of a little secret. Gets your kids super excited about wherever you're going, because they're making all the plans. So they have this full-on day-by-day plan. And if you are a sports fan, which we're not, but how could you not be a fan of the Iceland soccer team, which was a bunch of kids who just decided, let's have a national soccer team because no one plays soccer in Iceland. And that year, they beat England and went into the semifinals in the entire Euro Cup over the summer against France. Well, unfortunately, the big game against France, which was going to be broadcast on this huge TV in downtown Reykjavik overlooking the harbor on a big hillside, was the day my kids decided that we were going to go and leave Reykjavik, go into the countryside and find this amazing waterfall. But they decided, let's say yes to the soccer game, because that's a big thing. It's fun. It'll be memorable. And of course it was. There was 10,000 people doing this Viking thunderclap. I mean, it was just unreal.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the most amazing part of it. So the soccer game ends at 10 o'clock. Iceland unfortunately lost. And we realized we still have 2 hours of daylight because it doesn't get dark in Iceland in the middle of summer until midnight.
Mm-hmm.
So the waterfall is like 2 hours away. We figure maybe we could see it before it gets dark. So we're racing out to the waterfall. We get there at sunset. And this is one of these world famous waterfalls. The pictures of it are all over the internet and Pinterest, where you could actually walk behind the waterfall.
Oh, yes.
And it's really an astounding experience. But here's the thing that we didn't expect to happen. As the sun set, we walked behind the waterfall, and the entire waterfall, the water of the waterfall, was this brilliant, luminescent orange. I had never seen an entire raging waterfall, bright, luminescent orange. And as we got back in the car after just standing there, in awe for, many, many moments, we all realized that had we not stayed for that soccer game, had we not said yes to that opportunity, we would have seen the waterfall, but we would have never seen it in a bright, luminescent orange. That was probably one of the most beautiful sights any of us had ever seen. That's a moment of happiness that would have come and gone, and we would have never known we had missed it. But we had it because we said yes.
Wow. Wow, what a great story. What a great experience.
Mm-hmm.
And what a great thing to put in your suitcase of happiness.
Oh boy, that's a permanent entree. I get that one out all the time.
Right.
And my daughter, of course, she's publishing it all over social media. It was, and people, it was one of the most liked photos. No one had ever seen anything like this. Mm-hmm. Whoever sees a bright orange waterfall, it just, you don't think really exists.
Right.
So it's really all about saying yes. And Richard Branson, I thought, said it best. He goes, life is a hell of a lot more fun if you say yes rather than no. Isn't that the truth, right?
So true. So true. Yes, and I just, it really brings back, not as stupendous, but it really makes me, now that story is stupendous, but I remember a time when I was in junior high, when you were sharing about your story of growing up, and I actually said yes to a new concept, which was having choice. And it all came about because my junior high, yes, it was junior high. We moved around a lot, so I had to think of which school I was in. For some reason, somebody in the office had this brilliant idea to play Zig Ziglar's "See You at the Top" during our morning announcements. So I don't think it was every day. Maybe it was once a week, maybe like on a Thursday. But I know that we went through pretty much the whole series. And it all was about positive thinking and being positive in the world and just coming. It's funny because I don't really remember which episode it was, but I just remember thinking, I have a choice. I have a choice. My home life was not all that great. Like I said, we moved around a lot. There was a lot of very poor. My parents were divorced. My mom worked a lot to support my sister and I. I took care of my sister starting from about age 11 on. And so it just was this moment, I feel like I said yes. It was kind of like, I have a choice in how the rest of my life is going to be. I don't have to be unhappy with life, and I don't have to, which was what was being modeled for me, kind of like a victim.
Right.
All these bad things happen to us, and this is just the way life is, and life is unfair, and all these messages I was getting. And I just remembered at that point that was probably my big yes moment. At a young age, really. Yeah.
And do you remember any of the concrete steps you took at that point?
I just remember, and I remember actually kind of being made fun of for it because I started just looking at things differently. I started, this is, I've been accused of having the rose-colored glasses or the Pollyanna
Mm-hmm.
attitude. Now, not all the time. I mean, if you really knew me, you would know that that's not all the time. But I do
Mm-hmm.
really try, and I just remember just trying to find those little things and being observant of just the little wonders that came into your world. And I used to love those. That kind of was a time when these big inspirational posters started coming out. This was probably,
Mm-hmm.
I just remembered I loved those, so I had some hanging in my room, and it just was nothing conscious. It wasn't something that a seventh grader would intentionally do. I just remember trying to hold on to that. And
Mm-hmm.
I have to share with you too, I was very lucky when I moved to Dallas, and I actually did get to meet Zig Ziglar and thank him for that.
Oh,
So that
wow.
was a really neat experience. So yeah.
Well, I think it's fascinating that both of us, in about the same time period,
Mm-hmm.
decided that the path we were on was not the right path.
Right.
And both of us, within a matter of 2 or 3 years, were reaping the rewards of that change, which I think is such a strong signal to anyone who's listening, who's no longer 13 or 14 or 15 or 16, but maybe 55 or 65 or 75 in a very short period of time, starting tomorrow morning. You can change everything.
Mm-hmm. It is true. It is true. It's not, I don't want to make it sound like it's easy because I don't think it is. I mean, habits, I feel like it's a habit. It's a habit to look for the negative. You might not realize that that's a habit because you just are so used to walking around and that's all you see. But I still believe it can be done. And maybe we just
Well,
do
I
wear
think
those rose-colored glasses, but I do think it's
well, I
possible.
think it's possible. It's the same topic we had earlier. The negatives do exist. There is going to be that rude person who cuts you off on the freeway. There is going to be that negative coworker that says something bad once again to your face or behind your back.
Mm-hmm.
We can't change those things. We can only accept them. And by the way, life isn't fair. I've come to the conclusion as well, life isn't fair. So I could either fight that and lament it, or I could accept that and propel myself forward in a different way. And, that's the key. It's really to say, all right, these things do exist. I mean, that obnoxious person will be there tomorrow when I show up at the office, but that doesn't mean I have to let them determine my day.
Right. Right. Mm. Wow. Mark, this has been an awesome conversation. And I just really thank you so much for joining me. I feel like we could just go on and on and on and on, and then I'm going to have to do a lot of editing. Because unfortunately, I try to keep my podcasts about 30, 45 minutes, and I don't want to cut out any of the wonderful stuff that you've been sharing with us. So.
Oh, thank you so much, Liz. I feel like I've found a kindred spirit. I mean, there aren't many people who make similar choices to mine at such an early stage and who continue to focus their lives on working with others to make those same choices so that they could be happier and have a richer and fuller life. And I just applaud you for all you're doing in that regard.
Thank you. And same to you. Same to you. So where can the listeners find you online?
Well, Suitcase of Happyness, and again, that's Happynass, is available on Amazon, and I'd love for you to go to Amazon and check it out. You could also go to my website, suitcaseofhappiness.com, where there's all sorts of inspiration and pictures and things to explore. As a matter of fact, if anyone goes onto the website, they could sign up, and for free, I'll give them a really beautiful PDF, 15 Ways to Wake Up Happy Every Morning, which I just find so inspirational. I keep it by my dad, actually.
Yeah.
And then also, I tweet pretty much every day at Mark Jaffe, at MarkJaffe. I invite you to join the 25,000 other people who are followers and who I follow. And it'd be great to interact with you on Twitter too.
Sounds great, Mark. I'm going to go over and I was going to say tweet with you. And I was like, that sounds like really wrong. But anyway,
I know what you meant.
Tweets. There you go. So
fair enough. Well, thank you. This has been such a joy. I really appreciate the time we spent together.
Oh, me too. Thank you so much, Mark.
All right. Take care, Liz.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining Liz for the Midlife Schmidlife podcast. Remember, some days are never on your calendar until you put them there. Until next time.